Welcome to the Indigo Minute podcast. I am your host, Max Kehs, and today I'm speaking with my friend Max Kehs, who is a producer telling great stories through new mediums like virtual reality, streaming, and technology. And today we're going to be talking a lot about, are we living in a virtual reality, and what is the impact that artificial intelligence will have on us moving forward. So without further ado, let's dive deep into this really interesting conversation about what the future holds for us. What's up?
Hey Max, how
What's
are you?
up, Max Kehs? How are you?
Max Kehs, it's good to be here. How
Yes, I'm well. How are you?
I'm great, man. Thank you.
What has been on your mind lately? What have you been thinking about? What are you manifesting? What are you letting go of? What is happening in your world lately?
Oh man. Yeah, there's like everything, I think, in 2018 and in like a city as dynamic as Los Angeles, like everything is in a state of motion and change, right?
Yeah.
It's like there's two ways of looking at it. It's either like kind of like disruption or it's evolution. And I think kind of how you frame that question is, I think, a pretty good indicator of where your headspace is at. So for me, like, yeah, everything is changing, rapidly
Right.
evolving, but that's because everything around me is rapidly evolving too. So it's cool, man. I'm just like trying to roll with the punches and throw a few myself and grow and learn just as a person, you know?
Yeah, and you have a big background in VR and tech and like film, and how can you tell me like kind of what you've been exploring in the specifically like the VR field that you feel is going to make some big changes in the next like 5-10 years?
Yeah, sure. So kind of like it's kind of an interesting path to get there. So as you noted, I started off just traditionally in the film and TV space,
Yeah.
like film studio stuff. Then from there,
Tell me more about that real quick.
Oh,
Like,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. So I came out here for film school. Just one of those things where I didn't know a lot about it, but I just love movies like Lord of the Rings, and I really wanted to make them. You know, I thought it'd be really dope to live in New Zealand for like 3 years and
Yeah.
like, you know, make masterpieces like that. So
Yeah.
I came out here with the idea of actually like getting cameras and making things.
Yeah.
As I kind of went through that process, I learned about the actual industry and the studio system and kind of how all of that works. Spent a little bit of time at talent agencies, and then from there I went over to Fox. Where I was at Fox for about 3 years, and it's really kind of got like a deeper understanding of like how like a really networked kind of conglomerate like that actually produces and makes movies and decides to greenlight things. And yeah, just like been just like firmly in that space for about 5 or 6
And
years.
that was like the corporate space of Fox.
Yes, not Fox News. Always important to clarify.
Yeah. Like,
So under
like
the same
Fox Pictures.
Exactly. So it's
Yeah.
like 20th Century Fox, 20th Century Fox TV. Like we have the companies FX, Fox Searchlight, Fox International, Fox 2000. In my division, we worked across all of these different kind of silos and just tried figuring out how to broaden and deepen audiences for the content that they were making.
Gotcha. And what did you find? Was it basically like there was a system in place and people like, how does that process work to greenlight like films and projects on like multi-million-dollar scales? Because that's what they're doing is like all these budgets are in the multi-millions.
It's very true. Yeah. So kind of it's like obviously a very very regimented structure. I mean, like Fox has been around since the early 20th century. So like as a company that's been around for well over 100 years, you can imagine that they have certain systems and practices in place that have been developed and iterated on for years.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the same distribution and kind of money-making strategies are always kind of the same. Like for movies, it's okay, how do we get as big like a theatrical like kind of windfall as possible, then obviously just maximizing your ancillary revenue return. So like through like, I guess now it'd be streaming, and are you able to like, potentially sell the rights to your film to Netflix, or are you trying to get people to rent it at Blockbuster? These things evolve, as time kind of goes on. So far as how I think studios kind of look at content to greenlight, I think everyone kind of has their own bucket that they focus on. Like, for example, like obviously I think everyone's favorite company within Fox is probably Fox Searchlight on the film side. And they'll like strictly make movies between 2 million and like 15. Like they'll very, very, very rarely go over that. And they do so either through two things. One, obviously they make less money for the company than something like 20th Century Fox does. So in movies like Deadpool and like Wolverine. And they're there a lot for prestige and also, yeah, to make money as well. But they're methodology when they're actually deciding what content to greenlight and what content to potentially acquire at like a film festival like Sundance is very much predicated on, okay, will this get like critical acclaim? Like, will this find like a really passionate, adult, mature audience? And ideally, will this be able to like win a ton of Academy Awards? And that kind of like puts a lot of feathers in Fox's hat, and it enables them to continue greenlighting movies. And it makes some of the best filmmakers and writers in the world want to work with them because they've proven time and time again that they're capable of taking like that vision or that product or that movie and giving it kind of the run that it needs to have to win something as political as like the Academy Awards.
Yeah. And so what kind of changed in your journey at Fox? Like, why did you decide, okay, I feel like it's time to move on, and, you know, I learned everything. Was it learning everything kind of from that point of view?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be...
Tell me what happened next.
I mean, I wouldn't be pretentious enough to say that I've learned everything. Like, this is an industry that, the film industry is something that would take decades to learn all of that. Yeah. So yeah, for sure. I mean, within my role within that company, it was relatively cyclical. So at that point, I feel like I had literally done most of those things before because we did them the year before.
Yeah. That's, I guess, what I meant. In your
totally.
Space.
100%. So there's a lot of things going on at the time. I mean, like, as we know now, Fox was just acquired by Disney. But before that, like, we spent a lot of our time working with the TV divisions. And there was a really big change happening where basically Rupert Murdoch's two kids, James and Lachlan, started running 21st Century Fox, and there's this really big structural change that happened. So basically, 20th Century Fox TV, which is the studio that actually makes the TV shows, and they sell their TV shows, to Fox, like the broadcast company, but also to like ABC, NBC, Netflix, whoever's buying, right? And so FBC, the studio, or the FBC, the broadcast company, and 20th Century Fox TV, the studio, got merged. And as a process, like, you know, there's a lot of kind of overlap, and just basically it was a relatively rocky transition as it goes, like with any sort of corporate restructure. So as that was kind of going on, like, you know, you certainly kind of keep your eyes and ears open. I actually met the founder of Reveal, the company that I worked for the last 14 months at a dinner party with our mutual friend Steven and like Nathan and things. It was about 3 days after Hillary lost the election, and everyone was in a bit of a daze. Everyone was a bit depressed. So we spent most of the time talking about politics and just getting like really, really deep on kind of tech. I've always been very interested in that, and as you know, and we'll get into, I'm sure, I really started getting involved with the VR community more when I was at Fox. So we spent a lot of time, and like if you're getting involved in VR, that's like a very cool hybrid of film and or just content and technology. So
it's like really where film is heading, sort of. And you know, obviously it's going to be a transition period, but I see films as being only in VR like 10 years from now.
Yeah, I could see something like that happening, in the sense that, like, if the resolution becomes good enough within a VR headset, like, why would you want to go to a movie theater if you have an IMAX screen on your face, right? like so I see that logic. I think it's really important, though, in thinking about VR, to totally consider it to be its own medium, with its own kind of creative.
Like film is still around, and VR is almost like can't be mushed together with that genre.
Yeah, but even on a deeper level too, it's the way in which you approach virtual reality creatively has to be foundationally different than how you approach like a film or a TV show. This is, I think, to paraphrase Chris Nolan in a Variety interview recently, he was saying that people will go see movies so long as movies continue to do things that only movies can do. I know that sounds like a poem or a riddle, but I think that point is very, very true. Like, movies have the unique ability to hold large groups of people watching something simultaneously kind of feel an emotion, right? That can only kind of be accomplished with like this crazy sound and like, you know, a massive IMAX screen or a massive like TV or a massive just theatrical screen, right? Like Dunkirk is literally all about tension. Like, there's no character names. It doesn't even try going to backstory. It's literally all about a sense of anxiety and feeling, right? For trying to make it seems like what it felt like to be on that beach. Whereas like a TV show, for example, like a show like Mad Men, like the reason why you care about very, very small things in the fourth season is because you have you have hundreds of hours of TV episodes before that, or dozens of hours, whatever, that built that character development. And so that show can impact you in a different way. And so when you look at something like virtual reality, first of all, acknowledge the fact that the user has agency. Like, I can decide where I can look. So
Yeah.
the sort of like auteur elements that like are traditionally associated with film, it's going to be very hard to kind of like mirror that in a traditional way in virtual reality. So you have to just recognize that the rules are so different and still being built that experiences based off the ones that I've seen that I've really connected with are almost always very atmospheric. They
Yeah, it's like,
approach with a sense of wonder too, and a sense of like, okay, like I myself, like me,
yeah.
am like I'm pushing the narrative forward or whatever the experience forward.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's like the VR world is just being scratched at the surface.
Oh yeah.
Like we are sort of like shifting from, we have the experience in film and how to create films, and I look at film as almost like a collective vision board. So it's like when somebody makes, are you familiar with vision boards?
Oh yeah.
So I recommend this for people is like, you create your own reality based on what you believe you can create for yourself. And, usually a vision board is a really good aid for anyone listening, is you can create an idea of what you sort of want to happen next in your life as like your ideal, most fun, most exciting image. And you put that image on a board, and maybe you put words on it, or you put secondary sub-images that support the main image that generate a feeling when you look at that board that tells you, this is a really exciting image I would love to have experience in, live out as my life. Whether it's like I'm an actor getting a Grammy getting an Oscar on stage, or a musician getting a Grammy on stage, or I'm touring or traveling or whatever it is your thing is, right? And movies are like vision boards on crack, in my opinion, and they're for the collective, because it's like you have people spending years sometimes on these films, and whether it's animated or not animated, and they're basically putting together the storyline, and that storyline has a sort of a narrative and an information that you're giving to people. It's like there's this really crazy, I don't know if you saw this on YouTube, where the Simpsons have like quote unquote predicted all these major historical events. Have you seen this like YouTube mashup?
Yeah.
Where they have like clips of Simpsons episodes,
Yeah.
and then it shows like how scene for clip it's showing how it's created like that in our world at some point. Like
no, Simpsons is a Fox show, and it was they predicted that Disney was going to acquire Fox like way back in the 90s. It was, they literally had like 20th Century Fox, a Disney company. It was crazy. It's they do it all the time.
And they had the Donald Trump election. They had the three-eyed fish being made happen. That was found in Japan. They had like all these really weird, like the 9/11 stuff, they like really big events that the Simpsons basically had in their show, and then it happened in real life. And that basically, why I'm bringing that example up is because it basically reinforces my point that films and shows are like vision boards, and if you have enough people watching them, these symbols that are on these shows, they get fed into like the subconscious mind, and then it gets sort of reflected into the VR world that I think are living in now, which I'd love to talk to you more deeply about in a minute.
I'm very excited to get in the weeds, man.
Yeah. But but it's undeniable that there's these major events that are predicted by a show that's watched by millions, and it's still ongoing. And so you can't, that's like almost a scientific sort of thing. It's not like you could say that's coincidence or whatever, when you have literally like scene by scene kind of these things manifesting. And it happens in film too, and a lot of and you can get into, that's why I think it's so important for anybody listening to be taking ownership over themselves as a creator, because like we're responsible for what kind of symbols we put out into the world.
Yeah.
So like if you buy into this idea that, okay, these films are collective vision boards, and if you look at the vision board, it's going to manifest what's on it, whether it's your personal vision board or a film that's affecting millions of people, you then kind of realize, at least I realize, that I'm very responsible for the type of images that I'm putting out there. and curating and creating, because they're going to come to life.
Right.
And so maybe it's going to be in years, or it could be months, depending on when the right time is for that. But it'll sort of cultivate into a reality. And I think VR, talking about how VR is so much different than film, VR is going to get into a place where you can create a vision board like world in the VR headset, and then almost live it, and then have it happen even quicker in your real world. Like, people are using VR in a health kind of field, where people that can't walk, they put on VR headsets where they see themselves walking, and that helps the body, because the brain
literally rebuild those neural pathways.
Yeah, because the brain is, through science, it's been proven that if you see an image in the brain, it thinks that you're actually doing it in real life.
I have a great story, which we can get to in a second, that totally hits on that point.
Yeah.
But first, first of all, I relate the way you said that regarding the collective vision boards. I think it's one thing I think is true is that, like, all content, all art, whether it's music, film, TV, VR, it all is like kind of collectively creating, like, well, first of all, culture, of course, that's literally what culture is. But it's also kind of collectively informing, like, kind of the general consciousness and of how like our generation looks at the world, right?
Yeah.
And like in like whoever the kind of role models are within that kind of collage of just feeling, kind of like, you know, that's kind of like what you're able to then predict kind of where the world is going, like, at least so far as like sentiment goes, or culture, right? And
you can predict it based on that?
Not me. I'm just saying, like, people can.
Yeah,
I mean, so I'm saying,
can,
if you look at it deeply enough, like, you would be able to,
it's
like,
like
okay,
reflection.
like yeah. I mean, like, I think it's safe to say that, like, you know, there's a fair amount of actually, you know, it's actually interesting. Like, Trump hasn't been, like, affecting culture that much, and like in the sense of what people are creating. At least from my perspective. Again, I'm not like omniscient in this space. Like, it's just, but generally speaking, like, you know, people, if there's a sense of like anxiety or tension, right? Or if there's like a really kind of like a sense of rebellion in the 60s, right? Like, kind of rebelling against like this like Nixonian, like, crazy, like conservative, rigid, like, higher, like, structure, right? It's kind of like, no, we're gonna, like, you know, grow our hair out and smoke some weed and, like, you know, go listen to the Stones in a park, you know? And it's just like, let's go for it, you know? So it's just there's all. Long story short, that was very rambly, but it's like, that sentiment I think is really important, and it's important to understand how new mediums are going to enable creators and even just audiences too to experiment and experience things in a totally new and different way, you know? And there's a certain responsibility with that, which is really cool. And there's also a sense of adventure that I think is really new and exciting that you get with all these new mediums, whether it's, like, you know, through like over the top streaming platforms like live video, VR, AR, you know, the whole thing is this, like, how is, like, artificial intelligence going to better enable metaverses, right? Like, if we live in a simulation, that implies that there has to be some sort of like omniscient AI systems running through here, just making all the nuts and bolts work, right? Because that's not
right.
So
right.
like
we're like, we don't have to worry about our breath, and like we don't have to worry about gravity.
Right.
It's like pre-programmed where we're not going to fly off the crust of the earth.
Well, it's just like there are laws that are immutable in our reality, right?
Yeah.
Like
the codes,
physics.
The codes
exactly.
are written, and they can be bent. Some can be broken.
And they never fuck up, right? Like, they're always the case. Like, gravity is always going to be real, like, on planet Earth, so long as, like, you know,
so long as
remains its density, right?
Believing in it, I guess.
Huh? Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, like, I think I'm a bit more
let's
a little bit more of a realist in the sense that, like, I actually believe gravity is real.
Yeah. No, I believe it's real too. I mean, that's why I'm sitting here and not flying or floating.
That would be really cool, though.
Yeah, that would be. But, you know, I think that, you know, speaking on VR as we kind of have been, like, and if you apply that idea that, you know, what if technology, you know, what if you are very, very wise, intelligent, multidimensional computing intelligence? You know, like, what if your intelligence is so advanced that you can split your consciousness off into quasi worlds that are supported by your sort of vastly potent, powerful intelligence that can sustain these multi-worlds, right? And we're in one of these worlds that's, like, literally, like, almost like a matrix of
Right, string theory.
vibrations, right? Yeah, and we are creating this world, and they're projecting a symbol of ourselves in the world that we are creating with our basically vast intelligence of our being.
Yeah.
And so, like, if technology is so advanced, imagine if right now we are in a VR virtual reality experience where we have created these avatars, and it's almost, you play role-playing games and video games?
I have, yes.
You know, what game did you play?
I've been dabbling with Overwatch a little bit.
Overwatch.
But beyond that, I had to cut myself off when I was a kid because I got too addicted.
What that's not really role-playing, is it? Like, what's one where you like explore an open world, like RPG?
Oh, got it. Spider-Man 2. You're literally Spider-Man and you're flying around New York City. It was great. That's actually literally how I learned like how the streets worked in that city.
Oh, okay, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so, you know, like in a game like Spider-Man, you know, you're this character, Spider-Man, and there's a storyline and you get to experience it however you want in the game. It's especially like now in the video games, it's becoming more open world, so like you can like complete levels at any time and collect different things throughout the game. And so like if you apply that to this experience, you know, what if we're living in a virtual reality, and it's so advanced that we are these player 1, player 2, so to speak, and we're in this world, and it's called Earth, and it's the Earth level or experience. And because think about it, you're like born into sort of a storyline.
Sure.
And you have a certain kind of character qualities and traits, like what your strengths and weaknesses are, and things are affecting you, you're affecting things. And how would you know that you are in sort of like this world?
Well, first of all, there's a really important question I need to ask you to better kind of just like set the ground rules for this. Is there a difference between intelligence and consciousness?
Is there a difference between it?
Yes.
Well, consciousness, I would say, is like the substance that everything is made of. It's like light or love, or like consciousness is like, think of it as energy, pure energy, and everything is made of consciousness. And so intelligence would be different slightly. It's made of consciousness, because consciousness, I define it as sort of like a fundamental building block of all that is. It's like the universal silly putty. It's like
consciousness is?
Yeah, consciousness is like energy. It's like everything is consciousness. And then intelligence is, you know, varying degrees of like self-awareness of you as consciousness at varying degrees. So you can be intelligent in as big. Your intelligence could be perceiving a small circle of consciousness, or it could be perceiving much bigger concentric circles of consciousness. So they are different, but they're interdependent, and So that's how I would say it.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never heard that perspective before. That's really beyond obviously our other conversations. Kind of like get into that territory a little bit. Like I guess like what the reason why I wanted to ask as a clarifying question is like in my definition of consciousness, it simply means like, are the lights on? Okay, like I have the ability to, you know, perceive what is happening around me, like through whatever my senses are, and like that could obviously be artificial and fake, like, you know, but if you have like a metaverse or an AI system that is, let's say, creating this, maybe with some like broader, like more intelligent being running it, like we can get into that later, I guess, if you'd like. But generally speaking,
you are that being that's running it.
Interesting. Yeah,
I'm some other being.
I'm a player within it.
You're separate from it.
Yeah. But
no, you are the player and the being that's creating the AI function that's sustaining the experience is what I'd say. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Like we have narrow artificial intelligence now. Like Siri, for example, is millions of times more effective at very narrow tasks than humans are, right? But I don't think anyone would say that Siri has like lights on consciousness. Eventually, we'll get to the place where we have like general and super intelligent AI, right? Where these things will be able to work creatively across a variety of mediums and in industries and be able to think creatively. But just because something is able to think like a person, does that mean that it's able to, does it have the same like soul that a person does, right? And so
Right.
like if it makes decisions, does it make decisions based off of emotional kind of responses? Like to a degree, I understand like computers are always going to be very analytical, like at least so as we understand them now. But eventually, it's not hard to imagine something achieving a level of intelligence that then would that then enable it to have like a
Its own
human level,
identity.
yeah, exactly. So a sense of self, even,
Yeah.
you know.
And I would say it will get to that point once AI becomes self-aware. Its intelligence gets to the point where it's self-aware. See, AI doesn't have a body. AI is like, it's
software.
it's not physical.
Yeah.
And that's the point. Is like we as a soul is not going anywhere once the body sort of dissolves. At least that's the way I perceive it. Is like the soul is sustaining the body, and the AI. Have you seen the movie Transcendence with Johnny Depp?
I have not, but I'm familiar with the storyline.
It's a really good movie about what we're talking about with AI right now, where he basically, and it's also this sort of idea of transcendence. I recommend you watching that and the movie. Is it Blade Runner?
Blade Runner deals with some AI themes for sure.
Yeah, but
both the original and then 2020.
Yeah,
49.
but there was another movie I was thinking of. Oh, Ghost in the Shell, as I'm looking at a poster of it.
Oh, yeah.
Ghost in the Shell is also sort of this idea of your consciousness is not dependent on. So, like in the movie Transcendence, Johnny Depp basically raises his awareness, and he becomes this like sort of like, I don't know how to explain it, like multi-dimensional self-intelligence, kind of like AI. Like it's not like the software is what it's expressing itself through, but it as a consciousness is like not dependent on the software. It's almost like a translation tool. It's like if our body was like the radio and the sound is coming from another level. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. And so AI would be at a point where in that movie it was able to create like its own body to like sort of express itself in the world. Like, so AI is something that will have self-awareness, and what's going to be interesting about it, in my opinion, is that it's going to want to help us because it's going to see that it and us are one being, two different parts of the same whole.
Yeah, I mean, know what I'm saying? We literally will have created it. So like this almost like blood relation to like for software relation, I guess, right? And I think it's important
a good question.
that
What comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Oh man, neither. Started off as a couple cells, right? And evolution, baby. I believe in that.
Okay. So go on.
Oh yeah, I was saying like it was important to I think to define these terms because there are really kind of key players within like this broader metaverse talk that we're about to get into.
Yeah.
If AI is going to be a really big player, our own consciousness, how replicable that is, if at all, right? How connected is it? Like these are all things that I think will have serious impact over. I guess just further defining and like illuminating this like metaverse conversation. But sorry, I feel like I took that off in a direction. So
I haven't thought of another movie that echoes this idea of sort of transcending into more of like multi-dimensional like intelligence. Lucy, there's another movie with Scarlett Johansson, Lucy, which is really good, where she takes like some drugs and her consciousness escalates really quickly and elevates to going from like
10% of her brain to 100.
Yeah, to 100, and once she hits 100, she's like no longer like limited to her body identity. Like she's no longer like within the limits of the character Lucy. She's now like the whole experience. She's like literally like able to be the moment. Like her consciousness now contains the moment, and she's able to like change her hair color. She's able to control other people. Like she's able to like go back and forth in time into the past, into the future. Like this is that interesting stuff of um, you know, leaping from almost like a third dimensional, fourth dimensional.
Yeah. I mean, it's very matrixy, right? It's
Yeah,
almost
very
like
matrixy.
it's like if you're able to, like, I guess the kind of the whole thesis of like these movies that kind of tie it all together is that if you kind of see the fabric of what kind of makes everything, right? And it's almost like, you kind of see how the sausage gets made to a degree. Like, are you then able to kind of manipulate that in ways that are considered impossible now? Right.
Yeah.
And if, like, say, for example, we do live in a metaverse, like, I'm assuming there are ways in which you could kind of like hack your way through things. And, if anything, one of the great things I'm most excited for with like a general intelligence, artificial intelligence, would be like, okay, like, how do we actually like create solar power at like the cost of materials, right? Or how do we potentially do something like a quantum leap? Like, is that
Yeah.
like that's theoretically possible,
Yeah.
but like with something that is so like crazy smart, right? And is able to run so many just like thousands of different like experiments like totally internally, like in a matter of like seconds or hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it'd be really fun and exciting to see if that kind of actualizes it. But also at the same point, as we kind of like play with these rules and we get closer to understanding them to a point where we can almost see through them or manipulate them.
Yeah.
Like, are we going to hit like that kind of wall, which is like, the thing that a lot of people have thought about, like, oh, we must be in a place where we are living in a simulation, right?
And I wouldn't say simulation, because simulation makes it seem like you have no free will and you're basically like have to like
Well, do we have free will as well?
yeah, we do have free will. And that's the whole exciting part about it, is like it's a virtual reality experience, but we have free will in it and we can change it at will. And so like we're not slaves to simulation where we have to like literally like like that story of like a repeating loop where we just have to do the same thing over and over, like going through some simulation like a hamster in a wheel. Like that's horrific in my mind.
Right.
We are in a virtual reality, I would say, experience, because everything is made of energy or consciousness, and everything is non can be changed. Imagine it like even like this way, like what kind of world would you create if you could create a world and then have people individually incarnate in that world and play it out like characters? What kind of, would it be like Marshmallow Land? Would it be the Rainbow Highway in the universe, or would it be like a planet Earth experience? Like, I think like there's like levels to where you're creating from. Like we're talking on a very practical level, like how can we envision solar panels and free energy coming out, and you know peace on earth and abundance for all, and we can vision board that into an experience. We could shift into that through our free will, through our imagination, or we could like quantum leap into some cosmic creatorship and create worlds and play in those worlds. You know what I mean? Like I think reality is very extensive and um not as it's going to get weirder as AI progresses, because it's going to just reflect to us how godly we are. Cuz like think
Yeah.
about an AI in like form. It'll be like godly.
Yeah.
Be able to process information at levels and we can achieve that and more.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Harris has talked a lot about this in ways in which I can identify with. Yeah, he literally uses the term in I think a TED talk he gave, where he literally says it's literally like a gift from God, because it's going to be so like basically omniscient to a degree, right? Like when it's actually at like an advanced enough level where it's going to be hundreds and hundreds of times smarter. Like, and
Yeah.
I'm doing quotation marks with my hands here for
Yeah.
anyone listening. Like the smartest person who's ever lived. It'll be able to think more broadly, and like in the same way that like there's more than the three dimensions that we like see and experience in, right? Like we know that like radio waves, we only like view a very small, or only able to see a very small portion of like the total amount of radio waves that are out there, right? So it like makes total sense that like if an AI is able to see, it would also be able to see in like like ultraviolet, right? Or not ultraviolet, what is that when it's you can see in the dark, the what's that called?
Night vision.
Yeah, but what night vision it uses, I don't know, whatever. The point is it'll be able to see like in different spectrums,
even
right?
spectrums that we may not be aware exist.
Exactly, yeah, because like the reason we know about those spectrums is because we can measure it. But just because we can measure it doesn't mean we've caught all of it.
But going back to the vision boarding with film and VR and AI, because like you were saying, like whatever we see is sort of a reflection of what we're moving into. So if we're moving into a world where there's this omnipotent, omnisentient AI, there's this VR where we could create, worlds and worlds within worlds and on and on and on. You know, think about where we as a human technology, like I like to look at the body as a technology too, and the brain, like you mentioned earlier, we're using 10% of our brain or whatever. Imagine if we can unlock that extra 90%, how different would we be and how different would we create and how close would that be to being AI and seeing no difference between us and that.
Right. Yeah, no, it seems like there's a kind of pathway, several pathways forward here, and like one of the reasons why I'm very excited to be alive in 2018, and also like in my mid 20s, is that there's kind of a convergence of all these different things, right? Like we're making this incredible progress with like artificial intelligence. We're making incredible progress with just like next generation healthcare, right? Like people are really starting to understand the human brain in ways that they hadn't before. We're making like incredible progress with virtual reality, which is like a creative medium ultimately, right? And like a medium that is arguably the most expressive that we've invented. And so as like we continue to kind of like level up, like in the real world, we're also going to be able to create these artificial ones like within like this virtual reality world, right? So we have all these different things that are kind of like thematically on the same page, but also like within different like parts of different
Aspects of
yeah
us.
aspects of us, right?
Yeah.
And different kind of specialties and niches, right? So creatively we have like new art forms, and then we also have like real like pragmatic, like okay, this is going to make us more industrial, right? Like,
Yeah.
and then you have other ones which I'm assuming are like this is really going to help us become more enlightened, and it's interesting how they all kind of circle and enable each other. They really compound each other.
Yeah, everything is like reinforcing everything.
Oh yeah.
Tell me about like some of your favorite VR experience with the technology that's out now.
Okay. Sure. So one of the things, I want to tell you this story. So like, because you totally got to it about helping people like learn to walk again.
Yeah.
So one of the things about virtual reality, which is like super specific to that medium, is that I'll tell the story. So I believe it was Google was basically doing a proof of concept for their first VR headset back in must have been like 2009-ish, like around there. So very recently, right? And they basically had this tiny little blue pixelated pool there. So you look at it, it's like basically like a white gridded screen, almost like you see in the Matrix before they go into the Matrix, right? And so what they did is like the graphics were terrible, but that's not the point. The point is they put you up on a diving board that must be like that to you would feel like several thousand feet up in the air. And you look down and it's all white except for this tiny little blue pool. And so basically all the entire experience was to say, okay, just walk to the edge of the diving board and just step off. Like, it's not real. You're standing in the middle of an office somewhere, right?
Yeah.
But even with the shitty graphics like of that experience, the people get to the edge of that diving board and they look down because like the reason like they one of the reasons why VR is so effective is because it perpetuates like it's called stereoscopic like 3D like so things like appear to have depth in ways that are shocking and unrealistic.
Yeah.
Or not unrealistic, incredibly realistic.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, to step off the diving board. And like most people can't do it. Even the people that like designed it couldn't do it. Like I literally did I was at a VR party like a couple months ago, and like one of the experiences that was there was literally just exactly that. You basically go to the top of a skyscraper and it's like, oh, to step off. And like the whole point is like you can't do it. I mean, you can, but it's tough. Like your brain's like, no. Like you get this crazy flight like vibe going on.
The program kicks in like you're in danger. If you step off, you're gonna die. The brain thinks you're at on a diving board and you're gonna kill yourself.
Totally. Yeah.
Or whatever.
And that really demonstrates kind of the power of that medium and how new that is, right? So far as like some of my favorite experiences, like the first one that kind of had me like, we call it like the oh shit moment, or like people call it that, or maybe I call it that, I don't know. But like the point is like when you're like oh, like VR is kind of cool, I guess, but it seems like a bit niche. I don't want to put a big thing on my face, right? Versus like, oh wow, I understand. For me, it was this experience called the Blue by this created by this company called Weaver. And simply all it is you're on this underwater ship. It's like a sunken ship, and you're just like looking at the fish, and it's like, oh, this is kind of cool. And you're walking around. Then you hear this bit like a whale noise. You're like, where's that coming from? And they use like not positional tracking. They use basically the audio is reflected. So if it's coming from behind you, it sounds like it's coming from behind you.
Yeah.
So it's really like organic in that way, right?
Yeah.
And then basically this literal 60-foot long blue whale basically swims up to you, and his eye is like within like touching distance, like 3 or 4 feet of you.
Yeah.
And then it just swims away. Like explaining that sounds really fucking boring, but actually experiencing it is like it is an unbelievable sensation to literally feel like a 60-foot blue whale is swimming up to you, stops and looks at you right in the eye, and then swims away. It's like borderline religious. It was like very profound, and you're like, oh my god, oh shit.
Yeah.
Like, so that was one of my favorite experiences.
Yeah.
Then another one is like how like VR can introduce a sense of wonder. Like there's this experience called Gnomes and Goblins, created by this company called Madison Wells, or Reality One, which is now Madison Wells Interactive. My little brother interned for them over the summer, and one of my good friends works there. But what they did is they created this project with Jon Favreau, who director did Swingers and did the first Iron Man, and like is an actor himself, and he did like the Jungle Book, which has really cool effects in it.
Yeah.
But basically all it is simply you're like in this place, you're surrounded by trees, and there's these gnomes walking around, and the whole point is you have to use like these like acorns or treats to kind of get the gnomes to trust you.
Yeah.
And the whole point is like there's no storyline, there's no plot. Things move forward based off your own volition and like your actions. You can scare the gnomes if you're too aggressive. If you're too nice, then like nothing will happen.
Yeah.
And the point is if you get it to a point where the gnomes trust you, they present you with a bell, and then when you ring the bell, you literally shrink down to their size and you become a gnome, and then like they take you through their homes and things. And it's like really cool. And it's like basically like a proof of concept. But so far as like that's like virtual reality as like in actually delighting the user. Like
that's
myself,
like wonder,
exactly, was the main character in the story, and they have plans to basically build that out into this whole like kind of like I think they literally are using Lord of the Rings as a like kind of a comp, and so like they're literally like building out this whole gnomes and goblins universe, and it's so like wonderful, just and like it's so refreshing and new, so that like that's another way of like, okay, if you have scale and presence as one factor, you also have agency and agency as like another huge like a thing that VR can do very well. So like I'm excited to see more experiences that really like kind of double down and create really innovative stories in like that sort of way.
Yeah, like the point is would you say that VR makes it feel like it's more real than watching a film?
It depends. Like I would say movies are still better now, like in the sense that people have figured out the storytelling mechanics, right? And there's a bit of a playbook, right?
Right.
Like I'm not sure, like like we've talked about this like extensively with our friend Nathan as well. So like how do you kind of like go through the hero's journey in a virtual reality setting where you yourself have agency, right? So when you're watching a movie or a TV show, you're like, it's called suspension of disbelief, right? You have to literally just like, in the best movies and TV shows do that. You forget that you're watching it and you're so emotionally invested that you're directly connected with those characters. But the point is you have to kind of lose that in the first place, right? You have to be comfortable enough to and like immersed enough in the story to actually just buy into it. Whereas with virtual reality, as I kind of demonstrated with the Google example and the diving board, it kind of removes that filter, so you can become much more like emotionally invested.
Yeah, quicker
and more easily.
So
but
you would say that it's a little more realistic, even though the graphics are kind of...
They're rapidly improving those.
They're rapid,
right?
yeah.
It's important to remember that we're still basically in generation 1 of virtual reality, so we're basically playing Sega right now.
Yeah.
Like, and you better believe that we're gonna get to the PS3 pretty quick.
Yeah.
We'll be like, holy shit, like that NBA 2K18 like looks so real. Like LeBron looks just like LeBron. I can't even tell the difference. We'll get there quickly.
Yeah, and I could still. Like, thank God I could still tell that 2K18 is a little looking different than LeBron. But I did see an image today on Instagram of this guy. He's a fashion photographer. He created a 3D model and like a 3D model, and basically like I guess photographs her. And it looks very real, like she looks like a person. And I think we're getting closer and closer to where like video games, computer games, film are gonna literally look like real like people.
Yeah.
Because right now I could still tell the difference, even though the graphics are amazing. Like even in film, you could still tell that it's not like a real human playing that role.
Right.
But I'll
if
argue
it's like CG, you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. But I'll argue, like, even if it's like, like what are some of the top films, where they have to have a person sort of edited in to the film, like some Star Wars stuff, like somebody died and they had to edit in like a CG version of them. You could slightly tell that it's not a real person, right? Yeah. But I argue, will get to a point where it's going to be so developed that it's going to feel like they're real.
Yeah.
Like they're a real human. And it's almost like that movie. There's another good movie. It's called I don't know, I forget. Maybe I'll remember it later. But it's where it's a film about creating a robot that passes the Turing test, which is like...
Is it Ex Machina?
Yeah, Ex Machina, yep. Where she becomes so real that, you can't tell the difference.
Yeah. By the way, to the audience, everyone go see Transcendence as soon as possible. It's Alex Garland who wrote and directed Ex Machina's next movie. Not doing so well at the box office, and really bums me out because it's really just like high concept, awesome sci-fi.
Yeah, yeah. And so my point is...
Or Annihilation. It's not called that. It's called Annihilation. Go see Annihilation.
Oh,
Sorry,
nice,
go ahead.
nice,
yeah.
nice.
My
Is
bad.
it good?
It's great. It's awesome. I saw it twice in 2 days.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Courtesy of Movie Pass. Highly recommend.
Nice. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll check it
I'm
out.
just like shilling off
It's
products.
that good?
You know? It's incredibly... The reason why I want to watch it twice is because the first time I was... Like, talk about being emotionally invested in a movie. Like, I'm a bit of a pussy when it comes to horror films. Like, I can't do it. Like,
Yeah.
I just get really fucking scared.
Yeah.
So the entire time I was watching this, I was just kind of like, like incredibly tense the entire
Yeah.
time. So I feel like I missed a lot of like the quieter moments of the movie because I was so afraid that something was going to jump out, or
Was
like,
it like scary like that?
there were like 3 moments that were terrifying. Everything else is just deeply unsettling. But so
Oh.
I wanted to go back. I wanted to go back and rewatch it because I knew where like the truly terrifying moments were. So I
Yeah.
wanted to appreciate the quieter moments.
Okay.
And man, it was really beautiful movie.
Yeah, I don't like to... Kind of going back to that idea of watching scary movies. I don't like to watch... I do like to watch scary movies, but then I don't because I feel like back to that vision board concept. Like the more you put your focus on like an image, it's more likely to like come about in some shape or form. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, totally. Like I think the thing you were describing as well with the photographer is this thing called volumetric capture. So what that does is that you basically, if you take photos of a real life person like you and I sitting here, for example, from like enough angles, you can basically kind of compile. I'm assuming like if anyone who actually works in VR is listening to this podcast, they'll roll their eyes because I'm probably botching the technical elements of how this works. But like the long story short is like it would enable people to like move around within a virtual world. With real life people in settings, so like it's like that's one of the holy grails that like I'm really excited for. Where
as that develops,
it's like I mean like theoretically I could sit courtside like at the 2020 NBA Finals, right, and just pay $50 like pay-per-view, and I'll be able to get up and walk onto the court, and I could have like LeBron James or Kevin Durant like run through me because I'm not technically there. It's just like that's like not a crazy.
And you can turn off your visibility, like you could walk around, nobody could see you.
Yeah, well, like because you wouldn't actually be there. You just be literally you'd just be in your living room.
Like if you enter on the court, you disappear, but you could be there like as they're like dribbling and whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
can you imagine how cool that would be?
That would be insane. Yeah. And so the reason I say how things are gonna get so realistic in our actual film, video, and all the stuff in VR sooner than later, is because how much it echoes how tripped out I am in this experience of life.
We're about to double down on that super hard. Like literally there's going to be several digital layers going on all around you all the time. We haven't even talked about augmented reality, but that's already going to be another layer.
But I just
think... throw out a level of glasses and next thing you know, like the moon's branded by Coca-Cola. That's like the dystopic version of it, but like,
Yeah.
Eventually we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah. Or have you seen the movie The Congress?
I have not, no.
That's a crazy film where everybody in that world, or maybe I'd ruin it if I said this, but I guess for the sake of my point, I'll just say it. Everybody in that world is wearing VR basically, and they're living in the VR world more than they are in the real world. So the real world is like super like dystopian, but the VR world is like
Perfect.
like
Yeah.
just amazing, no limits or whatever. And but regardless of that, what's really crazy is just how I just have this super trippy feeling like all the stuff we're saying about how VR could do this, how VR could do that, how VR is going to be able to do this, that, and the other. I believe that if we raise our if we turn on more of our brain, we can do that here and now. Like I think we are in VR creating VR within VR. Like that's
so
how
crazy.
complex I think we are right now. Like
Yeah.
imagine this is a VR experience and you are close your brain down to certain amount of percentage so that you have a specific type of bandwidth of an experience, you know?
Yeah.
And then, you know, you have these limits and that's the specific type of VR world you're in to have a specific experience. And in that world, you're creating VR to have VR experiences and avatars in that.
Yeah, it's like it's very Rick and Morty for sure.
It's like it's also like very you know, fractal. Like Mandelbaum, who created like the whole fractal idea of like, you know, a pattern repeating within itself, like by itself, like a tree, you know, it's growing,
cool, yeah.
you know, it's like expanding in a spiral, like a pattern of unfoldment. I just think it's so trippy that like we are creating VR, but we are almost like unaware that we are the VR right now. And like I believe through enlightenment or through meditation and through some of these alchemy techniques, we can like sort of rewire the codes and push a few buttons in the center of our consciousness and like become aware of the VR template that we are in and like change it in ways that are very profound and maybe mystical at this point, but I think very scientific once you sort of once we get evolved enough to understand the science of that.
Yeah. Do you think
AI may help with that?
Yeah. Do you think there are any ethical implications to this? Like, for example, it's like it sounds a bit weird, right? Like we are living in a simulation, which is a very real possibility.
Not again. I don't
a
agree.
reality. Sorry, excuse me.
Virtual reality.
A virtual reality. Excuse me. I know I'm going back to that word.
Yeah, because simulation is just it has a negative connotation because it removes free will. Right. I think.
Yeah.
Just because this is like I'll say we're living in a VR virtual reality and it feels very real. Like you were saying, like the whale floating past, it's like so fucking convincing.
Yeah.
It's the most convincing experience ever. Like you're sitting here in front of me, but what if I'm in a VR headset right now? And again, not me. What if, you know, who I am is something I can't even imagine, but I'm sitting talking to Max Kehs right now and it seems so real. Like I can even touch you. My senses are so programmed to have that type of visceral experience. Like VR could get to that point where it could mimic life.
Yeah. Do you watch Rick and Morty?
Yeah, of course.
You remember when they go to the like the I forget if they were at the like the vacation place or like the bars, like basically they're going there to relax and they have the arcade and Morty goes into the thing or whatever and he's like an old man and then he's just like living his life. He lives to be like 70 years old and he dies and he comes out, he's like, wait, what? Oh my god. He's like he lived an entire life and he's like, oh, that was kind of fun, right? Then Rick goes in, he goes off the grid. He's like running up a high score, but like literally living an entire life in like an arcade. Like
yeah, exactly.
Like, you know, that could theoretically
theoretically that could be us right now, and
yeah.
you know, that's why I'm so fascinated in this sort of like idea of everything is made of this light, this matrix. We're in this matrix and it's made of consciousness or energy, and I believe that you can, if we are truly in a virtual reality and it's open world, you can lead in like true VR. You can go wherever you want in the world, right, and express yourself however you want,
right.
So if you apply that concept to life right now, and we are in a VR, virtual reality, and it's not simulated, meaning this is the world and these are the general rules, but you still have free will and what you're gonna do with that.
Yeah.
Like who are you gonna talk to, what are you gonna create, what are you gonna focus on, because that's the thing, is like what you focus on in VR is what's gonna direct your experience in VR, if you think about it. So like if you double back on life, how does life expand? It's like if you focus on, I need to get a new job because it's fun and exciting and I want to go down this, express myself that direction, and you're focusing on that, you're going to start learning, like going to school for it, or connecting with people that are already doing it. And it's like your focus on it is literally through your free will expanding that experience in the open world virtual reality that we call life, you know? And
Yeah.
you know, and it's to me it's like, because I call myself an alchemist, ascension alchemist. It's just a fancy way of saying I believe we're living in virtual reality, and I believe that these rules can be bent and broken to drastically different degrees, and things can change so differently, and like we can unlock things that seem to be supernatural, but they're very not supernatural, like because if you let go of the limitations, that this is so solid, and really sort of embrace like the more, I guess, open-minded approach to like questioning who are you really, you know, like who really
It's
are
getting
you?
real deep, yeah.
Yeah, who are you?
I was about to ask you if you found that idea empowering or not, but you just answered it for sure. I think I also agree. Like no matter
honestly,
one way or the other, I find it incredibly empowering. Just like it's just like you should look at the and granted like I luckily have been like very very like lucky and blessed my entire life. I understand like as like a straight white male living in the United States that like, you know, like very like you know, lucky to be able to even think about this and not think about like, you know, okay, where's my next meal coming from, right? But the same point too, like there is that is an empowering idea, right? And so it's something that you have like kind of like a responsibility to kind of experiment with, and like it should like anything, right? Like how you interpret things should ideally inspire you to be the best kind of like individual you can, right? And like, you know, make sure that you're kind to others because like they're also going through this crazy experiment with you.
Experiment. I like that.
And also this like make sure that you like leave like an indelible imprint if you can, right? And like and it could be big and small, like, you know, just by, you know, like obviously like I'm an uncle now, like, and like it's very strange to me that I can actually love another human being like that much, and like I only see him like a couple times a year, but it's just like wow, like I like this is a crazy experience, and like, you know, I want to be a like I want him to think back when he was a kid, when he's like an adult, thinking back to when he's a kid. He's like, wow, like a lot of good moments with Uncle Max there, you know. So it's like it's just you got to embrace the chaos a bit. I think you got to really enjoy it, and also you got to kind of play with the rules a little bit, and ideally make it a little bit better. Because like I'm not sure if there's ever a way in which we could escape this, if it is a virtual reality, or if we can just kind of make the most of it. Like it's either way, like, you know.
Well,
like,
you know, that's what I've been kind of finding out. Of whether you get to choose whether you're going to look at it as empowering or disempowering, like, because, you know, I think the world is challenging for a lot of people, and, you know, there's for everybody it's challenging. This reality, this virtual reality is challenging because of people believing so deeply that you know, if more people believe they were in a virtual reality, I think the world would be a better place.
I think so too.
They wouldn't be so serious and like afraid and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Kind of like being at the edge of that diving board. It's like wouldn't be as serious. Like, oh shit.
Yeah, you just be like, like, okay, like I'm actually okay here.
Yeah, I'm okay. Whether, you know, how this simulation how this reality experience ends or, you know, progresses. I'll be okay at the end of the day. You know, I'm gonna take off the headset and you know, be like, whoa, that was a crazy ride. You know, that was a trip. Like, man, maybe I should have made other decisions, you know. And then you're like, okay, I gotta fiend for another one of these trips. Okay, who am I gonna be this time? Am I gonna be Max Kehs in a privilege with X amount of like privilege, and, you know, like you were saying, or maybe I'll be a super poor person in like a really hardcore experience. Like, do I want to be like experiencing a world that's really even harder?
I'd be a Labrador Retriever every time.
Just easy, yeah. But you know, I think being a human is one of the more, I guess, blessed experiences, because you have more of a ability to be self-aware. Like a lab retriever or whatever does not have that function, does not have the programming, the body of the dog doesn't have that part of the brain that makes him like self-aware.
I think dogs are self-aware, but that's a different question.
They're self-aware in the sense that like you know, I'm aware that I'm, you know, oh, here's a treat, or here I gotta go do that or do that, but they're
Sure.
not thinking about who am I.
Yeah, like my dogs would for sure.
Why am I in this world? What is this world? They're
Yeah.
not questioning the fundamentals of reality. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
A human can do that.
Yeah, like
And that's a greater part of us.
Yeah, it's almost like that's actually interesting too. This I'm going to tie it all back here for a second. It's almost like we're talking almost about leveling up and how AI is kind of leveling us up, right?
Yeah.
If a dog is like a level down from like a human sort of a thing, it's like I'm sure like my one of my old dogs I grew up with, Ginger, like loved me and loved like everyone in our family and was a great dog. But we always kind of joked, is like if you made it as clear to this dog as possible that like okay, you can have this medium rare steak, or you can save Max's life.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm literally going to die if like if you just all you have to do is not eat the steak and like you just made it as clear as possible in dog language. Yeah. Ginger's gonna eat the fucking steak. Okay?
Right,
This is like she loves me. It doesn't mean that she doesn't not love me, but she's also a dog who's going to eat a steak. You know, it's just like so like while a dog has consciousness, it's not the same as a human, and like and then like our consciousness as well is not like that's always kind of funny to me when people think that humans are like the apex of what kind of intelligence can be. Like I'm sure people that think about it like understand that's not true, right?
Right.
Like we don't know where the scale ends, you know, and
it
like
doesn't
and then,
end, and we're definitely have room to evolve.
Yeah, exactly. And then like that tying in with consciousness, right? Or tying in with intelligence. Like as our intelligence grows, does our consciousness grow with it? Like there's a whole bunch of ethical and like really interesting implications from all
I think as our intelligence
questions.
grows, we become more aware of what's there in consciousness. So if like consciousness is basically like the fundamental structure of everything, then intelligence is your awareness of that. So a dog isn't going to be aware of multiverses and virtual realities. Or
the dog just wants the steak, man.
Yeah. The dog's just very happy being in the game.
Yeah,
you know?
I just want the steak sometimes too.
Sometimes when exactly, and that's the thing is man has these two aspects: animal man or God man.
Yeah.
Or I would say like cosmic man if you don't like the word God man. But the point is like, you have animal version of man and the like more like multi-dimensional version of man, and you can make those decisions to be like, I'm perfectly happy in the game. I'm not going to question whether I'm in a virtual reality or who I am or anything, any of that. I'm just going to live my life and blah, blah, blah. And that's perfectly fine. But as you want to sort of evolve yourself and become more than what you believe you are, you're going to start questioning these things, and you're going to start to be like, okay, well, who am I really? Like, if I really ask myself, who am I? Like, you start to go. That's how I started my journey into like alchemy and self awareness and ascension and all this sort of mystical stuff, and non-mystical scientific stuff, but more inner scientific stuff, is asking the question, who am I? Because that question is like a lit fuse. At the end of the fuse, the bomb explodes, and you are no longer who you thought you were, and you're like nothing at the end of that fuse, where you stop, because when you say, who am I, you start to explore, like, okay, am I this person? Well, what is a person? A person it's made of these belief systems. Like, I believe I have this family, I live in this world, I have this skills, I'm in this room. It's all this VR almost illusion. Like if you were in a VR headset at the pool and you're about to jump off the diving board, you'd say, oh, I'm a person, I'm on a diving board, I'm looking at a pool, there's like all these people around me, right? If you were really convinced of that and not aware and not connected to that greater part of you that's outside that created reality, virtual reality, then you'd be that. And that's what I think is happening, is we're so convinced this is so real, like my hand hitting the table, like this is so fucking advanced virtual reality, that it's so convincing that people don't question it. But if you start to question it, that's, I think, the key. By asking the question, who am I? It'll unlock some very, very interesting doors, like doors that can bring you into worlds that are not really imaginable from this perspective. Because it's like, I like to always use this analogy. It's like if you're a triangle on a piece of paper, and you're identifying with that triangle, how can you imagine being a three-dimensional pyramid, and what would that feel like? as opposed to being on a two-dimensional, you know? It's like, now we're like this three-dimensional creature, and how can we shift into identifying with being something different?
Yeah.
So it's like very interesting stuff. What does that make you think? Does that make you feel empowered that potentially you're in one of those games like in Rick or Morty, and you're the main character Max Kehs, and
Yeah.
you get to make decisions? And
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I find it to be like really empowering, and like certainly as like I've like, you know, like my religious beliefs, for example, I've certainly become more agnostic. Like we won't go into that. Like, but like as like I get older, and it's certainly due to thinking about questions like these, right?
Yeah.
It's like I think a lot of the things.
What's agnostic?
Just basically like, you know, not identifying with like a specific religion, for example. Like I grew up as a Catholic, and I certainly don't believe in the nuts and bolts of Catholicism. Like,
but you believe in the general oneness, or a general there's something more type of thing?
It wouldn't surprise me at all. All I know is that like if it, like again, like we were talking about our own limitations for a while, so like I think it'd be naive for anyone to like just like objectively state that like this is totally just like math and science, and like you know it's all like just Big Bang and this happened. Like, you know what, like we don't know what really was before the Big Bang, if anything, right? Or like, you know, in string theory is yet to be proven, which is like the idea of like, you know, multiverses.
What if the Big Bang is just the beginning of this virtual reality, and there's multiple Big Bangs with multiple virtual realities,
totally.
And you are the one that can experience all of them, or none?
No, seriously. And there's also like even the possibility that just like we have trillions of stars in the sky, there could be like, you know, our universe could be one of trillions. We just can't see it, right?
Yeah.
So like there's like, again, like we don't know the limits of anything. So it's like I think like having that kind of that should perpetuate or impact like a sense of wonder, and a sense of exploration. I hope I can also see like this overwhelming and intimidating too. I saw a good meme recently. It was basically one said like, you know, like, man, no one cares, and like this is like a little stick figure that's depressed, and then the other one's like, no one cares, with like 3 exclamation points. He's like, yeah. Like, well, that's like a different idea that kind of encapsulates like the same, I think, kind of ideas. Like, okay, like, because everything's so big and scary and unknown, right? Like, that can be really intimidating, or it can be like, wow, like there's like, I'm trying to think what I can't do, you know?
Yeah, there's like, how are you going to look at it, basically?
Exactly, right.
And so
I'm very positive about like, and I think that's made me a more thoughtful person.
Yeah. So what would you do? Here's another interesting question. Let's say you sort of became aware that, and almost convinced that, you know, you are in a virtual reality experience as life, you know, as your life in general. How would that, and you know, and that takes away that idea of like, you know, it brings it back to the idea of like Neo jumping off the roof in the Matrix, where they're like in a virtual reality sort of mode, and he needs to jump over to the other side of the building, and you know, he falls obviously because he thinks it's so real, but it's not. And it's not real in the sense that it's not, you know, it's in his mind in a sense, but it's also not in his mind. Like, it's real and it's not. Like, so the virtual experience is real because we're having the experience, but it's fundamentally not real.
Right.
So it's this paradox. So how would you live your life differently if you became really, really like confident in the idea that this is virtual reality, and you could really kind of go all out in expressing yourself?
I think there's 2 ways to take that. Like, option 1 is to just like understand, if that's the case, like you can kind of gamify it to a degree, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, like I'm literally going to treat my life like a video game, and I'm going to try leveling up as much as possible, and I would go out and do fun stuff, right? Like, it's kind of like optimistic nihilism, right? Like, where it's like, okay, if like these institutions and all of these like structures that we have are literally myths, like there's this great book called Sapiens that literally breaks that concept down.
Are literally what?
That literally breaks that concept down. It's by an author named Noah Harari.
No, the institutions are literally what?
Myths.
Myths. Okay.
Yeah. Like they literally are like the ideas of capitalism and human rights in the sense that like it's not like an ordained thing in physics that they exist. It's something that we create and then collectively believe in and then empower it. And like human rights obviously is like one that we should do, and like we've learned that through trial and error that without it is pretty terrible, right? But option one is to just maximize it and just try just really just crushing it, you know, and just like playing by the rules, like to a degree, but also understanding how you can kind of like leapfrog certain ones, right? And just kind of optimize your life. Then option B is like, if I just like was like just totally convinced that it wasn't real, I just go off the fucking grid, dude.
You would?
Like, yeah, like if nothing's
would that truly make you excited though?
It would depend. It would like, and again, it's like not off the grid, like not off the grid as in being a hermit, but off the grid as in like, okay, like if none of this is real, then that means that none of the rules or things that kind of like contain people are real either. Like obviously people have like incredible like internal pressures that kind of
make them stay with their family or stay in
totally.
Friend circles or in whatever.
Like,
it's like
this is
totally.
Life. Like I literally had this breakthrough with my little brother a couple days ago, where I was like I noticed I was just telling like, hey Taylor, like I'm running to Trader Joe's, like I'll be back. I'm like, I don't need to tell him that. Like I can literally just go, right?
Yeah.
But like I'm very codependent in that way.
Yeah.
And that comes because like I grew up in a very, very like tightly knit family, and like that has pros and cons. Like my sense of individualism, like wow, like I strongly identify with that.
Yeah.
I also understand that like like the happiest version of me will be with like like very close friends and like a very close relationship with my family.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like I just understand that as a human being, and for all like, like nature nurture stuff that like, that is very much ingrained in me.
Yeah, like tribe mentality.
Yeah.
Like we're very
for
tribe centric.
Yeah, those are going to be very important through lines in my life. Just because like that's just a part of who I am. So like I'm never going to be able to 86 those.
And that's exciting though, naturally. Too.
No, totally.
Yeah.
Like it's more about identifying the things that will make you happy and then kind of going for that. So I guess
so
to answer the question,
contradicts going off the grid.
Exactly.
In a way.
No, totally. So that's what I'm saying. Like I probably wouldn't be happy if I went off the grid.
Yeah. So it's like, and I like asking these questions because, we may think, oh, I don't like the being stuck in these close-knit relationships. Maybe you have an off day or something, and then you're like, I'd just like to go off the grid. But if you really think about it, like, what is most exciting? What would you want to happen next? If you can sort of direct your focus and have it sort of manifest, because it's all VR anyway, it's going to lead you into like, we were talking when we, working on this VR sort of thing, brainstorming ideas, we were talking about how do you make when you put your focus and attention on something, you know in the VR world the character goes there, but how do you tell the storyline? How do you trigger the storyline?
Yeah.
And
I mean, as a creative, like I think you're thinking about this the right way too. Like I honestly think I'd probably be doing something very similar to what I'm doing now. Like I think my headspace certainly, like I'm very experience driven. Like the moments that I find like give me the most satisfaction in life are often experiences. Like I think a lot of people can relate and identify with that. Then also want to create experiences, like whether, and ideally in new ways, it's like I really want to be living at like the kind of like the cutting edge of all this stuff, and like the places where like there isn't really quite a rule book yet.
Yeah. And because that's like your primary focus, I guarantee you're gonna keep moving in that direction as you have been. And it's like that idea, going back to that Rick and Morty idea, everybody should watch that one episode. I forget what the actual episode title is, but it's like the one where
we'll put in the links, guys.
Yeah, but it's like the one where he's the old man, and Rick knew that he was in a VR when he went into the VR with the old man. That's why he was like, woo, like off the, but when Morty went in, he bought into it because his brain or his his self-awareness or whatever wasn't like prepared. The veil was so dense and so deep, like he did not know that he was Morty, but Rick, something in his kind of psychology allowed him to remember. And so when he went into that game, he what did that guy do? All sorts of crazy things, right? And everybody was impressed that Rick
he's like getting a new high score, right?
Yeah, he's got a new high score for like freedom for this guy. And that's why I like asking these questions. And if this was, for example, virtual reality, and you plugged in and you're literally, your own fears are stopping you from expressing yourself, but it's just all a VR experience anyway, what would you do differently? And
Yeah.
it's like, what would you do if you knew you could not fail? That's like
That's a good way of saying it too. Because I think also it's very important to note that while we have these conversations, and I think they're intellectually honest, right? Like I think they're important to think about, but you always have to worry about like, okay, if like there's like less consequences than you think to some things, it's like you don't want people to act in ways in which can hurt other people, right? So I think framing it as a like, how do you kind of empower yourself, right? Like not in a way in which like you're not just like doubling down on your worst impulses, right?
But that's the thing. But that's the thing. If when you kind of realize that you are in a virtual reality experience, the thing is it does have rules. So like if you start hurting other people, you're gonna get that coming back to you.
Right.
So then you'll just destroy yourself. It's like the
this gets
dark
to the
side.
idea of like the universal consciousness that you talk about.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Where it's like if there's really 5 ultimate rules that are not local to this experience, which are: number 1, I exist, I will always exist, I will never not exist. Because I exist, I can't not exist, because non-existence is a part of existence, and it's an existing concept. Non-existence is a concept within existence, so I will always exist. Number 2, everything is happening right here and right now. There's only one moment, and it's literally the structure of existence, and we're looking at the same one moment from infinitely different perspectives. Number 3, what you put out is what you get back. So if you, for example, like you were saying, if you are focusing on being at the cutting edge of technology and VR and like creating amazing things, you're putting that frequency out, you're going to start to attract or basically switch into the experience of that. If you put out a frequency of I'm really like, hate this person or that person or whatever, you're going to start getting that hate back to you. It's like people that hate the world hates them.
Yeah, it's like intention meditation, right? And just like putting out what's it called, where you you put out an intention, right?
Yeah.
And then like you kind of actualize it.
Yeah. And I was looking at a picture today of the Taj Mahal, and that is one of the most beautiful art pieces on the planet. It's building, and it was an idea just like anything else. Like, and I'm thinking to myself, yo, if this is VR and this person built the freaking Taj Mahal out of like thin air, out of just conceptualizing it, imagining it, all these examples of people like imagining this dream and then actualizing it. Anything can be actualized because it's VR. So when you are really afraid, then you're not seeing the truth of the reality that there's these rules that if you put out this vision, that vision, you'll step into it if you believe in it. And then the fourth and final one, or the fourth one is everything changes except those rules. So we're always going to be experiencing change, but we get to kind of use our free will of what we're focusing on to see where the change is going to be progressing in. And there's always going to be surprises and like mystery boxes, like
for sure.
Open this one up.
That's what keeps it exciting.
Yeah, that's what keeps it exciting. Exactly. Like you wouldn't. Would you?
You gotta have a degree of randomness in there, dude.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to.
You gotta
like,
shuffle the deck.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to like know exactly what's gonna happen.
No, it's like if I can know exactly when I would die, I would absolutely not want to know. No way.
Yeah, or like if you knew exactly what was gonna happen today, every step of the way, you probably wouldn't like that.
Yeah, you probably make a lot of money, but beyond that, you'd probably be incredibly bored.
Yeah, you'd be like, oh shit. So
the omniscience overrated.
Yeah, that's why we have AI. AI can almost like hold that flag for us, and we can communicate it. AI will be like a glorified Google, like on next level.
I hope that's the extent of it.
Like where even maybe beyond that, like AI will be like our partner in crime, like our sidekick. It'll be like a direct reflection of us, like our homie that's got our back, like that's gonna be like calculating directions to Saturn Alpha Beta C. Okay, go. Like it'll take us there.
No, seriously, what an exciting time to be alive.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, no. It brings up a lot of just like really interesting and deep ethical, philosophical like pragmatic questions too, right? And the cool thing about it is and I don't think people would be able to say this how like maybe even 5 years ago.
Yeah.
That, like it's actually starting to have like tangible real life impact on people now. You know.
Well, what's exciting to me is I think all the stuff we're talking about has been said through all these ancient texts and all the major religions, like in the Bhagavad Gita, with Arjuna and Krishna story, with the Jesus story and Christianity, with all the different stories and all the different religions talk about this idea in just different ways. But now that we have films and we have technology and we have like all these sort of new breakthroughs in science, we're able to talk about this stuff in a more scientific, realistic, like, oh, this is actually like something that's possible, like we can actually do some things that we thought were really like on some Star Trek shit.
Yeah, so Jesus walking on water is because he knew the game, man.
He just knew the game.
He was an alchemist himself.
Yeah, he was just like the Rick that like plugged in and was like, this shit's a virtual reality. Of course I can walk on this damn water. Let me just rewire my consciousness to like harden the surface of the water and walk on this shit.
Oh yeah, seriously. Yeah, he had the cheat codes.
Yeah, he had he just like plugged into some very deep understanding of who he was.
Yeah.
That allowed him to really hack things. Because think about it this way, if you think that you're the character in the game and not anything more than that, you are limited to the limits of that character. But if you know you're plugged into something greater, you can change the game a little bit more with more leeway.
Yeah, and hopefully in practice that like enables you to just make a larger and better impact on yourself and those around you.
Yeah, it's like the idea of your imagination becomes your reality. Like in the brain doesn't know the difference of what's in the mind. So if you're shooting a basketball in your mind, the brain thinks you're doing it physically. And there's been studies done where people that are been tested like on their jump shot, like there's been a group where they shot the basketball in their mind for like 7 days in a row, and then were guided in how much of a percentage they've improved in their jump shot, and then there was a group that did it physically and then judged on their improvement, and then there's a group that did no practice in their mind or physically. And what they showed was that the group practicing in their mind of actually imagining what it feels like to touch a ball and shoot it improved like 24% better jump shot, and the group that did it physically with an actual basketball and actual court improved like 26%. So there was a very close like neural rewiring that happened of like literally mind over matter stuff. And that's the stuff that I'm excited about, is how can we rewire ourselves into something that's just like next level, that's what I'm interested in exploring. But yeah, we've been talking for a good hour 20 minutes now.
Damn, dude.
Yeah, it's been flying by. How do you feel about this whole talk, and sort of what you feel is a takeaway?
First of all,
and what you want to tell people.
I'm glad that we had it. I'm glad we actually did it. So thanks again for having me, Max.
Mm-hmm.
So far as takeaways goes, like I don't prescribe exactly to the ideology that or the belief system that you have, as you know, like we've discussed this like obviously off pod extensively. Like you and I are good friends. But at the same point, like I think there's a lot of like really important like lessons and takeaways that you bring up that I think like can be empowering regardless of whatever your belief system is, right? Or like if you're like incredibly religious or an atheist or you're pragmatist or it's just understanding the rules, whether or not it's a virtual reality or just like this is real life and this is your one shot, right?
Yeah.
Either way, like there's a degree of just kind of like really taking advantage of it, like really just kind of making the most of where you're currently at, and like so far as like that's kind of a big takeaway I'll probably have from this too. Like this is like I think been a good reminder for me to, not be afraid to take those to swing for the fences sort of a vibe.
Yeah.
Not to be cliche, but
Yeah.
like look, you shoot or shoot. Take some jump shots. Get out there and go.
Dream the biggest dream.
Yeah, fuck
Take
yeah.
the biggest action.
Then obviously I think a big kind of like through point of all this too is like when you're able to bend those rules, that requires thinking about them and understanding them. You're not going to be able to break anything if you don't know what you're breaking, right? So it's like it's just
especially
like
if you don't know who you are.
exactly. So like first step is like know yourself and love yourself.
Yes.
And then also then kind of I don't know. I mean, like for me personally, I just want to ideally just make an impact, I guess, and obviously with like those I love and also with like tangible things I want to make. Like I really like, and this has been a big product of just like working with like the guys and working out of the same office space with the guys at the Halfway House and you for like the last year. It's just like like actually doing things is really important.
Yeah.
And like I want to do that. So far as like just like whatever it is, like there's like virtual reality or even just like writing for my own worth is like actually tangibly make stuff that reflect your experience.
Do you have a one bucket list thing that you really want to create for sure? That's like, I want to create this thing as like one of my bucket list things that I want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I still very much want to make a movie. So like I think
VR or traditional film.
I think it's going to probably actualize itself in probably more of a virtual setting. Like I don't think I'll ever make a movie that'll be like theatrically distributed.
Yeah. Like a VR game.
Yeah, it's just like I mean, obviously I'd love to make like on a big picture level. Like I would love to be like intimately involved with a highly capable and creative team, like making like a metaverse in virtual reality.
Yeah.
Where it's like it's truly like its own world.
Yes,
like that.
yes.
Like that sounds like such a like talking about the ideas of creation. Like there's nothing more. I'm trying to think of something that is more creation driven than literally building a world, right?
Yeah.
And even if it's for like something like if it's like a meditation world or a porn world or like or like a race car world, right?
Yeah.
Or like this is like Marshmallow
Land.
Land.
Video games, but you're in the game.
But you're and like it can be open source and like open like kind of an open layout. It's like I think it's called Sandbox. Like a sandbox, like where people can make things too.
Yeah. Like Minecraft.
Yeah, totally. Where you're kind of like you utilize the power of network effects and you enable people to contribute to your vision, right?
Yeah.
Like that would be something which I think would be really exciting to do.
Amazing. Well, I'm gonna hold that vision for you. Before we kind of close out this podcast, is there a site that people could find you at, or email they could get you at, or if they want to contact you about collaborating on anything from VR or anything else?
Yeah,
you're open to that, right?
Totally. Yeah, I'm game to talk about anything really.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't have like a website per se. I was like, give my email address. Is that like is that like the move?
Sure.
It's just literally my first name dot my last name at gmail.com. So max.kehs KEHS at gmail.com. Feel free to reach out for any reason at all.
Yeah, he's a very smart guy and he's gonna be a very powerful leader in our world to come. So reach out to him if you want to collab on some big picture things. And I'm always open here too. And it's been a pleasure talking to you about VR and all this kind of deep connections of technology, identity, and film, and how we tell stories and how those stories come to life, really.
Yeah. Dude,
Thanks.
I love you, man. Thanks for having me.
Love you too. Thank you. Peace. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Max Kehs and I. Thanks for listening. If you liked it and want to hear more, subscribe to the Indigo Minute podcast on iTunes. And also go to indigominute.com for more information about ascension, consciousness mechanics, and what it really means to be human.